RT is sitting down with Richard Wolff, American author and professor at New School University. His new book, Occupy the Economy, Challenging Capitalism, hits shelves in the next few months. Mr. Wolff, thank you very much for sitting down to speak with me.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
2 years ago, you said that the crisis would take not just a few years, but much longer to overcome. It is the common belief that the so-called financial crisis is basically over, the one that started in 2008. So where do you think the U.S. economy is right now?
I think the way to answer that question is to recognize that this crisis is a crisis of the entire global system. And where it is extremely bad at one moment, it'll be relatively easier at another as the symptoms move around. For example, the United States was in much worse shape in the first 2 years, 2008 and 2009, compared to Europe. 2 years later, the years 2010 and 2011, reverse. The United States is not the extreme problem, Europe is. And the financial crisis that we talk about is as severe today in Europe as it ever was in the United States. The banks in Europe, for example, are in such trouble that almost no day goes by in a European major newspaper where someone isn't talking about, will we have our own Lehman Brothers type of collapse, the way we did here in the United States. For both of the periods, the 2 years that America was worse, the 2 years that Europe was worse, Brazil, China, India, Russia, the BRIC countries and so on, were doing real well. They're now in trouble. So my advice is, before Americans count their chickens that are not hatched, beware that the crisis that was bad here, then became bad somewhere else, is heading back here to give us as many problems now as we see the Europeans having, but we'll have them a little bit later. The housing industry in the United States, big improvement until about a year ago where it's flattened out, and now it's going down. And that is as important a shaper of the future of our economy as ever the uptick in the automobile industry is. So the jury is out. It's not at all clear that we are anywhere near out of the woods. And it would be even more difficult for Americans if they got their hopes up at a time when there really is not yet the foundation for doing so.
You have said that it was World War II that dragged the United States out of a depression. If so, if that was the case, was George W. Bush and his successor, Barack Obama, doing the right thing by pursuing wars and, in some cases, currently considering new ones?
Well, I think the difference is in World War II, putting aside the specifics of that particular war, the technology of warfare meant that if you're going to fight a war, you're going to need millions and millions of people. We had millions and millions of unemployed people. We basically took half of them in 1940-41 and put them in uniform, and the other half we put into factories to produce the uniforms and the guns and the bullets and all the rest. Today, warfare, for political and technological reasons, does not require large numbers of people. It is both politically too dangerous to get large numbers of people involved, and it is not necessary for the kind of high-tech warfare that we now specialize in as a nation. So warfare isn't going to do the job. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and even the one threatened with Iran now, are not the kinds of war that will soak up the unemployment in the United States, and so it doesn't represent itself as a solution. You're going to have to find some other way to take masses of people and give them work. And I don't think the private sector is up to it. We've had 5 years in which the president, first Bush and then Obama, told us about the incentives they're going to give the private sector to hire people, the inducements. They gave all those incentives, they gave the inducements, and the private sector basically decided, keep the money, keep the incentives, don't hire the people. So at this point, if you don't come up with a real employment program, you're not going to deal with the problem. And war isn't going to do it unless we are thinking on a scale that is really outside the realm of what is safe for even gung-ho types.
How much do you believe the global economic turmoil that the world is currently going through is a product of Wall Street as opposed to Main Street?
Let me be as strong in this as I possibly can, because I'm asked this question often. This is a problem of our economic system. It is not the fault of Wall Street more than it is of anybody else. I understand. On the left and the right, and even in the center, there's a desire to pin the the donkey, the tail on the right donkey. Find a scapegoat, blame somebody. So if you're conservative, you blame poor people who take out mortgages they can't afford. If you're on the liberal side, you're angry at the bankers who, after all, gave them those mortgages out of their own greed and their own desire to make a buck. I don't think that's the way the game is played. I think poor people, middle-income people, and rich people try to make a way for themselves in the system according to the way the system works. Bankers do what the banking system has them do. And the same applies to everybody else. When all the different people in a system act according to the rules of the system and the outcome is a bad arrangement, then it's the system that's the problem.
Occupy Wall Street arguably